Hi, I'm Marisa Parker, née Pier Giovanni, the debut author of Goodbye to Italia, an award-winning World War II love story about my parents in Italy and Africa. Welcome to part one of a three-part webinar as I take you on my journey of writing a family story. Just to note that what was right for me during this experience may not necessarily be the way you decide to go. After all, this is a creative process and each person is different. Okay, so let's get started with part one, setting the scene and creating a framework. So, what's your family story about? And why is it a good story? From the beginning, think about your key messages. In one or two sentences, what will your story be about? This may change over time, but it will help you when you are trying to identify why it's a story that would be interesting to a broader audience. For instance, Goodbye to Italia is a World War II love story. It's about my parents. My mom is a child with terrifying bombings in Italy during the war, and my father, a young Italian soldier captured and sent to a detention camp for 6 years in Africa. I had started out this process as a legacy for my family, but as I went on, I was just so taken with the story that I wanted to share it with the world. There was an age difference of 13 years between my mom and dad, so the photos at the beginning of each chapter that I decided to put set the scene for the start of the book, which coincided with World War II. They went through such diverse experiences during an 8-year period, and I really wanted to show this. For me, I had to decide, and for you, you should also decide, who is the audience? What is the bigger picture? Why should someone read it? I'm a perfectionist as well, so it had to be a story that I would enjoy reading. Therefore, at the back of my mind, I always thought that primarily my audience would be women who'd enjoy a love story, not a soppy love story. And since I've populated it with interesting historical events, I'd hoped and still hope that it would be of interest to a broader audience as we go on a journey through time, that is, during World War II. And then you have to consider what information and resources are available to enhance the story. Remember, resources can be the chats that you have with your family and not just physical things. The different perspectives that each family member has on just one event can provide you with great content for a whole chapter. You don't have photos? Well, look at this one that I sourced from the Red Cross. However, think about copyright implications. You do have to ask for approval if you are using photos that are available online. A great piece of advice I was given early on was to have a photo of your protagonists or main characters throughout the book. I was lucky in that my mom had kept her photos, so I could print out a photo of her and my dad and put it next to me while I wrote their stories. It really helps you to get into their character and set the scene, a visual reminder that's important. Even if you don't have photos, maybe something of theirs that was important for them, that symbolizes them. It places you in the moment and provides insight. Amazingly, by writing the story, it finally made me realize why they did some of the things they did, and in fact has provided me with some insight into why I am the way that I am. Just looking at this photo of Zonderwater made me realize, finally, what my father had really gone through when he was a prisoner of war in the detention camps. Again, if you do make contact with your family members, or distant family members, you can find some great resources. I have cousins in Italy, and on the off chance that I asked them if they had any photos of their mom, my half-aunt. I mean, we only send Christmas cards to each other every year. Yet look at this photo. It's one of my aunt with my cousin just as a young child. How credible that poster of Mussolini is in the background. If I hadn't asked, I wouldn't have this. And in fact, chatting with my mom, who would change between English and Italian, it gave me the idea to include Italian phrases every now and then. Look at my aunt. Rather serious and not surprising. She was in the middle of the war. But when I think back to all the times that I met her as a child, she was just such a vibrant, laughing person all the time. And you have to think of that, have to think of setting the story in the contents. A couple of questions that I've been asked in the past is, during the initial writing process, is it necessary to have a framework? What if everything's a jumble? Look at it from the perspective of the reader who doesn't know your family. Maybe consider a mind map. I'll discuss a mind map in the Part 2 webinar. What if I get writer's block is another question that I've been asked. And that's an interesting question. For after all, this is a family story, so you have a lot of material. However, maybe you're stuck on writing a certain episode that's been very emotional. Maybe it shouldn't be included. Or maybe it's just time to move on and come back to it at a later stage, when you've gone further down the story and can look at it without such an emotional feelings. So in summary of setting the scene and creating a framework, what's the hook? What's the unique value that makes your book different to all the other family stories out there? Who is your audience? You need to use words and write your manuscript accordingly. What resources are available to add depth and breadth to the narrative? What do the rest of the family think about this idea? You do have to be respectful of their opinions, although not necessarily include or agree with everything. But think of the consequences if you decide to carry on without that. So, thanks for listening to Part 1 on writing a family story. Part 2 will focus on identifying the flow and double-checking facts. But in the meantime, I'd love to hear from you, so please do contact me through my website.